This can't be fixed. Worthless. Junk. Oh well. Time for some modding.
Mongoose Jake here with my promised mod guide for the Busby Agitator. Now, I'm going to try to make this as quick and to the point as I possibly can. I'm not known for being quick, but hey, I consider that a good thing. But hey, we'll move along, and I already have the shell torn apart. I've actually went and done most of these steps off camera, but I will go over them with you as we go. And again, in essence, trying to speed up the pace a bit. But of course, first off, you're going to have to remove the pump grip. It's just 2 screws holding on there. Take all the screws out. In this case, unless I'm painting the shell, I leave the screws in. That's simplest for me. Just a quick little advice there. Now, again, I have already had this apart, and those eagle-eyed viewers might even notice a little shininess down here. Yes, I've already actually taken care of my breech work. It is done, but I'm going to show you a few things here real quick. Now, taking my screwdriver, here is your catch mechanism. Now, the way it is designed, it is highly reinforced. You will have to remove this to actually easily pull the plunger out to do all your work. 1 Phillips screw removes this cover plate. So go ahead and set that aside. The actual catch has an integrated spring. Don't lose that. Now, in this case, I'm not going to upgrade the spring here on the catch. Most Busby catch springs do not need to be upgraded except for extremely high spring loads. And I'm not going to do a high spring load on this. I'm actually just going to go with a 7 kilogram. Go ahead and remove. There's 2 springs, or the 2 screws. One was hidden underneath the catch, and then there's a large flange screw up on top. We'll set that aside. That allows access now to your spring, your main spring, which is retaliator sized, as well as your plunger, which, for those of everybody else, this is known also as a piston. We don't use that term in the blaster hobby, and I'm not sure why, because in my background, I was actually I actually dealt with hydraulic and pneumatic cylinders in the past, and that's simply, this is the cylinder, that's the piston, that's the rod. We call it a plunger tube, plunger rod, and plunger head. Yeah, let it be. Now, for those of you who are wanting to modify this, a definite tip is to remove all locks so you have full control of your blaster. Get rid of this, locks removed. Good to go. Nothing else, nothing fancy that you have to do, just pull that out. Now, what I'm going to recommend with this is what I recommend with every Busby blaster. You don't have to necessarily go and do the actual breech work like I've done. Make sure I got that on camera here. It's hard to get on camera with that priming rod in the way. You don't necessarily have to go and do a brass sleeper breech. I did, but you don't have to. What I do recommend is taking either a... You can do the work with a 1/2 inch drill bit and teeth come in from the backside and drill out your air restrictor, clean out everything. You can do that, be careful. But I actually went and ordered on Amazon a 17/32 drill bit. I actually got this thing, I think I only paid $4 for it. 17/32 is not a common drill bit size, but it just so happens to be the outer diameter of our brass tubing that a lot of modders work with. And for those of you who wonder, there's what I use. That's a KS number 8140 round brass tube. I buy that at 17/32 by 0.014. That's 13.49 millimeters for all of you on the metric system, instead of us oddball Americans. And you drill that out enough to where you can push in your sleeper breech. And I just do a very simplified brass breech. I actually, if wanted, I can do a video on that specifically. I'll share that in a different way. I will show just quickly how I do this. My method is that I take a dart length and I mark off what I need. This is just for my, call it the Mongoose Jake brass breech. I go just a bit past a dart length. Take a pipe cutter, cut around it, And then on the end that you actually want the dart to feed into, you take the other end of your, this is the what I use to spread out. You work around and that'll give it a trumpet flare. And that's all there is to it. You just work your pipe cutter around. I do a little bit more than a dart length, so about like that. And then I flare out one end. I keep the other end crimped in to help prevent vacuum feeding. And that's it. Once you've drilled out, and if you have to take a round file to clean up a little bit inside of the stock breech, if you have to clean that up, do so. You can also, if you don't have a round file, you can also take some very fine grit sandpaper, wrap it around a dowel rod, and just work it back and forth inside of the stock breech until you have a nice clear placement of your brass. Push that down in, cycle it a few times with the blaster part. I actually will work a magazine in, and I will cycle the breech by hand a couple times, make sure the darts feed, and that's all I do. Make sure you clean up everything. I actually wash these out is what I do. And then re-lubricate. I got some of the worker lubricant here. You just take that, put a little bit on your finger. Make sure you lubricate lightly. Don't go crazy. If you go crazy, what you'll end up happening is causing excess friction. But re-lubricate your plunger tube. And then, of course, you need to pad your plunger head, which I will do with hot glue. I'll actually even show you that here in a second. And then we will reassemble this here real quick. Okay, here we are coming back. I've had to wait for my hot glue gun to be ready. But all I do is fill in this. This is a two birds in one with one stone kind of event here, where not only am I padding the plunger head, I'm actually filling in the dead space, because this kind of hollowed out plunger head, it actually is taking away from your air volume that gets pushed out. I have a friendly fly showing up here in the workshop. That air never gets pushed out of your plunger tube, so that's just a loss of efficiency, and that's something you do not want to have. Basically, we're looking at a simple volumetric principle. We want as much air pushed out the breech as fast as possible. So therefore, the highest efficiency we can get. So now here we are with a hot glue filled in. I will clean up the excess here off camera. But this is my simple way. Just fill in. Make sure your plunger head is clean and dry. As you can see, I've got no dirt. The fly is actually really friendly. There's no dirt. There's no lubricant inside of this plunger tube, or plunger rod. And let's go back. Okay. Now that it's been filled, you can see there, I'm letting it cure. I'll clean up the little bits here in a second off camera. But it does serve the dual purpose of being a dead space remover, because that's actually about 1/4 inch deep, and then you have nearly an inch across. Not going to do the calculation there, but that's enough air volume to matter. That's just that much less. If you don't do this, that's that much less not being pushed out the end of your breech. And of course, now that I have done it, it also has a little cap. As you can see, if I hold it nice and level, it'll dry this way and cure. It has a nice little cap over it that sticks out just farther than the plastic rim of the plunger rod end here. And that will actually provide a small buffer if it were to impact the end of the plunger tube. And that's what we're looking for. It's just that little bit of like a rubber stopper almost. And hot glue works fairly well in this application. Costs pennies. So very good way to do it on the cheap. And by the way, doing brass work is not expensive either. And this is my favorite kind of mod. It's the kind of everybody can do. But what we're going to do is I will set this aside and we're going to move on. Now, reassembling the blaster, I will do that part off camera. But what I'm going to do is, yes, I do keep a whole jar full of 7 kilogram springs. It is my favorite thing. I don't actually currently attend wars that require anything above and beyond what the power of a 7 or 8 kilogram spring can provide. And I buy these by the half dozen or at 10 at a time from NF Strike when I order, and they are much more than capable of hitting 120, 130, 140, 50 feet per second velocities out of Busby blasters when you brass a breech. But we're going to go ahead, and now that my hot glue job is done on the plunger head, and you can see it started to cure. We're going to go ahead and reassemble this thing, and I will do it quickly enough here on camera to where you see, but I'll actually put the shell together off camera so you don't have to endure that. I'm already going to make this video far too long with my chatting. But now this whole assembly sits in here. Make sure to lift up the dart guide, and there is a little bit of fuss and fight that you have to do, because if you remember, that little screw there down here actually has a flange that you have to watch out for. So here we are. Got that down in. Okay. Now you have the spring rest, which is also the plunger rod guide. We have to feed that, and you do have to stretch the spring a bit, but it will sit on there. That is not a problem. So you put that in, place this down, and then I just have to get that in place. There we are. And yes, the spring is longer than stock, so you will have to fight with it just a little bit until you get this screw in place. And that is really the only hitch to the whole process. And I'm going to do it live so you see, instead of just slamming it back together and saying, hey, we're good. Unless you guys complain about that. Let me know in the comment section below. Do you actually want to see this in real time like I'm doing here? Or do you want to see a mod guide where I show you a few steps and then throw the blaster back together and say, done? I'm open to feedback. But this is real time this time. So go ahead and put this together. Like I said, I won't make you suffer through the shell being reassembled. But we're going to reassemble the internal components as you would have to at home. So I think that's genuine and authentic, in my opinion. Place that. Now that rod that I'm working with right now is for the dart tooth. You have to line the trigger up to that right there and make sure that's in place. The last thing is you must put the actual catch in. You set this down in right here. There we go. To make sure it goes down, and it has its little spring right here. Take a small flathead or Phillips screwdriver, push that over, and then you have your catch guide plate here. That actually has to go over the catch and behind the trigger. There we go. Got to hold that down. Over the catch, but behind the trigger. And this is what I'm wanting to show you. The realistic part of modding here is that you will have to actually walk through and do this stuff. And if you're trying to hold everything in place, there we go. Now I just need to tighten that screw up. Now the catch is reassembled. The trigger's in place. There. And that had popped up. Okay. So now everything is in place. I need to reassemble the shell, and I'm going to do some work on the stock here. I'm going to take it apart and show you how to do that. Okay, I am going to include this quite, we'll say, resourceful way of fixing the stock from collapsing in. It's not really a huge problem. You know, it stays out quite well, but I am never, ever going to fully collapse this stock, ever. So, very simple method. This is what you look at when you take the actual stock apart, because it has 6 screws holding this section together. You find a spring-loaded mechanism that actually holds it to the blaster. That's the larger extension part. The smaller extension part has a trigger-activated point that actually lifts this little arm up, which I've now hot glued down, and put in a few darts that have been cut down, and then a part that's been cut across to fill in the gap to provide a stopper. And it is all literally piled in hot glue. And that's going to be the way I actually keep this from being a collapsible stock, because, well, I don't need it to collapse. I never will use that feature ever again. So we're getting rid of the feature. Well, and now I will reassemble this, and we will come back when the blaster is completed and put together. Okay, well, I have it put together, and I have fired 145 shots over the chronograph, and I came up with an average of 139.9. And yeah, that's a lot of shots. The reason for the weird number is I was firing 5 at a time in different batches. I had some darts that turned out this thing didn't really care for. Could be my work on the brass breech, but I had some shots that with the AccuStrike copies, some of those it responded to far better than others. Actually, I like the worn versions better than the brand new ones. Some of those actually were only hitting around the 100 to 105 foot per second range, and that dropped the average down. Whereas I had worker full lengths, it loved, and Busby Precise Pros, it loved, and some narrow tipped, it's not necessarily waffle darts. I'll have to get out a couple here to show you guys. These are ones I'm testing out, but I actually like these quite a bit. I actually had shots going anywhere from 140 to 170.8 or 178.8. Excuse me, that's what kept the average up high enough, is the Busby Precise Pros, the worker full lengths, and these darts right here from NF Strike all worked really well. Now, it's obvious why the worker full lengths worked well, and these, they have the smaller tips, and they work well with brass. The Busby Precise Pros, I'm assuming they worked well because this being the simple brass breech that I do, the head it sat flush, and the foam had good contact with the brass. But honestly, my brass breeches may be tight enough that it should be pushing under at least a 9 kilogram spring to get the most out of it, I believe. But hey, this Agitator is averaging 139.9 after 145 shots. Good enough for me. It's a 140 foot per second blaster firing full length darts. Keep in mind, these are not half lengths. Now, I can run half lengths in this thing now. So I could always go that route if I want to, because once you brass it, you can run half lengths if you so desired. Which then again, 139.9 average blaster is going to push way up toward, they gain 30 feet per second a lot of times with half lengths. So this would be more like 160, 170-ish foot per second blaster with half lengths. But I'm not running that. I run full length darts, and 140 foot per second blaster. Again, that's 145 shots, averaging 139.9. As you can see there on the chronograph for yourself. That's awesome. And that's all I need. That's more than what I need for my wars anywhere here locally. I'm going to do long-term tests to see if that priming bar, which is a longer distance, and it looks a little bit lighter duty than the Thermal Hunter and Interceptor, which has proven extremely durable under a 7 or 8 kilogram build like I do. I'm going to see if this thing can hold up to that long term, so I'll be the guinea pig, so you don't have to be. But again, this is my mod guide. I originally started by saying it was going to be quicker, but hey, we're going to be up here around 20 minutes, so if you've stuck around all the way to the end to see these results, I do appreciate all the support you've done for the channel. I would say if you haven't already subscribed, consider becoming a subscriber, because that really does help keep me motivated to keep going forward with more guides like this, more tests, more reviews, more purchase of products to use, and the kind of stuff like this that literally takes blood, sweat, and no tears, but blood and sweat. Because I'm now out in my hot 90-some degree workshop, and I have cut myself a few times. So that's part of the life. But this thing, again, it's right now, short term, definitely a worthy blaster of modding. Even just with that minor mods and a simple brass breech, which I'll do a standalone video on that thing itself. But again, if you've stuck around all the way to the end of this, thank you for watching. This is Mongoose Jake saying I hope you enjoyed this and that it's informative and helpful for you. And till next time.